Welcome to the Innovation Cities Index. The Innovation Cities Index is the leading ranking of cities for innovation in the global innovation economy. The ranking has been conducted since 2007. There are 445 cities in this year's 2012-2013 index, and it's a 7-year publication. What we do to gather the data for the index is we collect 162 indicators and we consult those to form a view on how ideas get turned into implemented innovation and communicated globally. So what that means in practice is that the cities that rank well or come towards the top classification, which is called Nexus in our index, are the cities which are general destinations for innovation that you would do well in without regard to industry. That is, in general, if you didn't have a specific industry in mind and you weren't seeking an industry cluster, these locations are good locations for innovation at this current time. Now I say at this current time because the Innovation Cities Index does vary from year to year, and since 2007 it started off small with 22 cities published out of 95 assessed, and it has grown to 445 cities. So that covers all major continents, all major regions, and if you're looking for innovation, these are the places which have the preconditions for innovation. So what do I mean by preconditions for innovation? Basically I mean the background set of assets that will enable people to innovate. Now those assets can be hard assets and they can be soft assets. Now if you're creating innovation, what you want to do is you want to look at which destinations are the best or general destinations for an innovation economy. And that's what the Innovation Cities Index does. In point of fact, we have in there quite a few cities which would do well in any measured index, but surprisingly in the livability indexes, they often do poorly. Now, that's because the livability index is designed to measure expatriate experiences for executives. That is not the same as measuring innovation. It's not the same as measuring business destination desirability, cost of living, or any other sort of factor. There is a cost of living component to the livability index, but it's unusual because cities like Melbourne, which are very, very expensive to live in, often do well in cost of living, and large metropolis often do well in livability, and large metropolis like Paris may not do so well. It's interesting that people tend to self-assess their city in different ways to what a cool, calm, collective measured assessment of their city using metrics and defined indicators would do. So what we do is we do that. We do cool, calm, collective assessments of cities based on metrics to which we define, design and create innovation for. My background is that for Too Thick Now, which is the company that produces the index, is that we've done this for a long time. My background is I started doing this sort of work in 1999, some of it in 1998. Basically, one of my first jobs was designing metrics for the performance of HR departments, which required a lot of soft indicators. So I've been doing metric design since then, before it was fashionable, before big data was fashionable, and before anybody cared what it was called. But effectively, this is big data for cities, or data analytics for cities, or data analytics for innovation, or innovation metrics, and it's definitely not measuring patents. So there have been some misinterpretations of our index. It's not measuring patents. We measure patents as a part of 2 or 3 indicators where they belong in the science, medicine and other areas. We do not measure patents where they don't belong, which is in measuring something like the food industry. The food industry is not about creating patented products. It's about creating healthy food that doesn't make people obese. It's about creating innovation in different ways. So we look at an innovative kind of younger view, if you like, or a more interesting view of how innovation can happen. That said, there are lots of interesting ways that our data can be applied. So without further ado, I'll get to some rankings. First ranking, Boston and New York. Now Boston has always done well, and that's Harvard, MIT, but it's also the medical industry in Boston, which is one of our segments we address. It's also the fact they have a metro system, they have a community, a campus university experience, they have a knowledge economy, they have quite good restaurants for an American city, they have a variety of other programs that were set up by Mayor Thomas Menino. They have addressed the broadest number of segments and broadest number of indicators that we've seen in any city to date. However, New York under Mayor Bloomberg has really attacked that, and it's not directly that they've attacked what we've proposed, but in many ways they are following the strategy we would set for many cities. They are attacking issues that are part of a city's remit and are complicated now that we have difficulties between state and federal governments and the designs on who controls what in the economy of each state. So New York is the joint winner with Boston this year. It's the first time we've had a joint winner. New York deserves to win. And we could cut the data many different ways and we'd still have New York on top with Boston there. So they are in the top echelon and will be right now. Interestingly enough, before the big dig, I doubt that Boston would have met as many of the criteria. So that's something that shows you that over time cities can change. And Boston is punching above its weight, even though it has Harvard and MIT. And a very good other collection of colleges, I might add. It's got a wealth of riches and it does have the history for innovation. And some interesting stuff happening in robotics, network economics, drones, all sorts of stuff out of MIT at the moment. There's a plethora of stuff we're interested in that is happening there, and it kind of shows up in different indicators, and it shows up in the preconditions for innovation. Fascinating stuff. Okay, so Boston and New York, we kind of expect that. We were the first, by the way, to name Boston. Nobody else was naming Boston as the most innovative city in the world, and we were the first. New York, you get that. It's a city of scale. It does have the scale and the global financial clout, and that carries through into a wide variety of indicators. It has a few negatives though, and all major cities do. That's why it can be equated, and that's why our index is good, because what it doesn't do is it doesn't reward or self-reinforce or create feedback loops that reward me tooism. It rewards cities for being themselves and achieving what they can do. So you might be interested in the other cities that rank well. Let's have a look. Vienna always ranks well, a previous winner. San Francisco Bay Area, otherwise known as Silicon Valley, although we may demarcate along borders. If we added in other parts of San Francisco, we would have a slightly different result. So if we added in different parts of the Bay catchment area, we'd have an interesting result. Paris, Munich, London, Copenhagen, Amsterdam, Seattle. Seattle has come into the top 10, and we are very bullish on Seattle. Seattle is punching well above its weight and has a great series of things to offer other cities in terms of innovation. Seattle is interesting because it's not as connected as other cities in its location, so it is really punching above its, what we would say, network market weight. Toronto is an interesting one, in at number 11. It was at number 10 last year. Don't read anything into that. 10 or 11, it's just a call. We feel that Seattle is just pushing a little bit stronger than Toronto this year, but Toronto could pip Seattle, Seattle could pip Amsterdam. Anything can happen next year, so we don't know. Los Angeles, Berlin, Hong Kong. Hong Kong's an interesting one. It's a global nexus. It's a place where people go. It's one of those towns, it's like a movie from Casablanca. It really is a global connecting point. It's a point for innovation. It's a point where innovation happens. It has a global entry point to China, mainland China. It's a fascinating place. It's the number one in Asia right now. Next, you've got Frankfurt, Stockholm. Stockholm's been talked about a lot as an innovative destination. Lyon in France surprises a few people, but a fascinating place when one measures innovation in different ways. Melbourne, Hamburg and Sydney. This is obviously shot in Melbourne. I'm from Melbourne. That's the sort of thing that that people look at when they're looking at an index. Where's the index from? We are independent in many ways because we really, in Australia, don't have a lot of cities that are in the top of the index. We assess neutrally outside of the index structure of these cities. So we have Melbourne there, we have Sydney as well. They're the two major Australian cities that do well. And in between, it's sandwiching Hamburg, which is a major German city. Seoul, Washington DC, Philadelphia. Seoul's an interesting one. If it wasn't for the issues with North Korea, if it wasn't for some other issues, their technology clout would take them a little further. And Seoul has had some interesting things in the e-government space and a variety of other case studies that can be used. Washington DC, of course, is a global pole of power and always will do reasonably well in our index. Philadelphia, Manchester, Tokyo. Tokyo's punching a little below weight. Chicago has moved up despite crime issues which would hold Chicago back from reaching the very top echelons. There are a number of issues in Chicago which need to be fixed by the mayor's office. Stuttgart, Tel Aviv. Stuttgart surprises people. Tel Aviv is an interesting one. First Israeli city in what we would term the nexus cities, which is what I'm reciting to you. Tel Aviv is a wonderful city for innovation and startups and is doing really well globally thanks to their global connections. there is a lot of stuff there that is interesting and is having a global impact. So Tel Aviv, we think, has a strong future. Shanghai, Singapore and Montreal, not many surprises there. Singapore can go higher. There are some things which make Singapore perhaps required to do a little more on the cultural asset side in the future. We have also Montreal, Kyoto, Brussels and Dubai. Interestingly enough, Dubai, first Arab city to be in the Nexus. It's moved above Abu Dhabi, which is the competing Emirate city and the competing sheikh, but Dubai has done some marvellous things, notably the Palm and also the World and a variety of other things. It has recovered in part from the effects of the GFC. It has some form of magical innovation potential there that can happen. It really is a great place for innovation economy. Now, all these things and all this advice that I'm giving you about these cities is about their general innovation potential. That is, if you look at a balanced sector and segments and you measure across a balanced range of segments, and you don't just look at science and you don't just look at patents, which is a very slim, narrow view and you can Google why is innovation not measured in patents and find out all the arguments and you can make up your own mind. But if you look at the broad-based view of innovation, you have a pretty interesting time of it. So I think the first thing is to look at that broad-based view and then see which of these cities really suits you. Now, that said, you don't have to go to a Nexus city. There are a series of hub cities, and all of those are listed on the index, and you'll find most of your favourite well-known global cities in the hub cities. You'll find that some South European cities, such as Spain and Italy, have fallen. If you were to go into Spain right now, you would still stick to Barcelona, possibly Bilbao. Madrid is looking patchy. You would possibly look at Milan in Italy as an interesting place if things turn around. However, Italy has some serious issues with governance and serious issues with the outcome of the recent elections. So there are a lot of things which have to be determined for the ultimate goal. So the rankings reflect all of those factors. And your decision as to where you invest your innovation as an investor, or where you set up your startup, or where you build your business, or where you live or work or play, where you go and do things in a global innovation economy comes down to your choices. And one of the things you need to look at is your language. Obviously, you're going to go to a Spanish-speaking city if you're Spanish-speaking primarily. You're going to go to an English-speaking city if you're English-speaking primarily. These things are all factors in the Innovation Cities Index and how you would use it. So this is a general ranking. Where do we go from here? Well, we classified all the cities, Nexus, Hub, Node. Most of them are remarkably consistent over the years. There are some fluctuations obviously caused by the GFC, but we did predict the GFC. We did write in 2007, I wrote the section of the report which said specifically that we were going to have serious issues if they didn't address the issues of innovation. We also decided that the three challenges for cities were economics, equity and environment. And remember, this time was the time when Goldman Sachs and the others were all banging on about how wonderful it all was and only issuing an occasional cautionary note. So we were kind of out there back then, and we've been building that ever since. So we use a few technologies to do that. We use a trend analysis technology, and we use which is based on a trend curve, and we use a series of data technologies to gather data about cities. A lot of this is interpretive, a lot of it's qualitative, turned into quantitative, a lot of it's very interesting stuff that nobody else is doing, and that's why Toothpick now are able to give you better information than other people. What we can do is give you innovation on innovation information. We can give you information to implement innovation in an economy, and the main thing we've been working on is scaling our processes so that we can grow rapidly. So Toothpick now is based in Melbourne, Australia. This Innovation Cities Index is released, this is the 7th year of release. I'm not going to talk much longer because it's been 20 minutes and this camera is starting to cut, mainly because due to the load on my laptop and the fact that the person who's going to do the video got food poisoning. So, all good. It's Australia, we're just going to lay back about the whole thing and not worry too much about it. We're going to release this video, and I hope to see you soon on the Innovation Cities website. If you see me at an event, or if you'd like me to speak at one of your events or come along and do some training on the innovation process, we can. We've modelled it, we understand it, and there are other people who also can assist in the training from our analysts. So, it's time to get out there and start innovating, and if you are innovating, keep innovating, and I'll talk to you soon.